ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Zombie Train. This is episode number 279, and I am your host, Ellis, otherwise known as Train Man. We are here today in the swamp. We're doing more work, as we did last time, thanks to the comments of the people. And, yeah, so that's about it. I'm working in the swamp. It's actually getting a significant amount of progress, just because of the time that we've spent on it. But that's something to talk about in the episode. Right now, we're going to talk about 3 missing engines. This was a question posted by Actually, we're not, because here's the thing. It was allegedly posted by TPOP311 on episode 226. I'm looking at episode 226 here, and not seeing it. So, maybe it was posted on 227? Let me just make sure that I didn't screw that one up. And, then, if I didn't, we'll talk about some stuff, like some other missing, I don't know. I don't know where it is. But, yeah. Missing engines. And I can talk about this in a more general way, just to sort of address the topic. I know I normally take a topic and then wander off, but this week we can talk about the engines that were just too far gone, which there weren't many of. Yeah, there were some engines that were sort of like, jack the whistle up and roll a new one underneath, but there were engines that were on my list. Because eventually I got into a database and I compiled a list of all of the engines that were, that were surviving, all the steam engines that were surviving, and I still have that list hanging around, that we could potentially restore. Well, it was really all of them, period, and I actually had to weed out the ones that were listed, I had to weed out all the ones of different gauges, including like 15-inch gauge park engines and stuff like that, because obviously those were of no use to us. And then I had to weed out the ones that were way too far gone. And these were engines that were basically listed as, like, drowned or sunk. These were engines that had done things like fallen off of bridges or fallen off of barges or, been buried or, used as part of an embankment or something like that. There weren't too many of those, but they definitely existed. One of the larger ones was B&M 3666, which fell off of a bridge in, I think, Portland, Maine. But I don't know. The engine sat on the bottom of the, it might have been Portsmouth, New Hampshire, actually. But it fell off a bridge. It's sunk. It's still sitting there. It's not in any sort of good shape because, well, they tried to dissolve it at one point. They wrapped, like, cables around it and tried to, induce an electrical current through it that would make it dissolve in the salt water. Didn't really work. They had to drag it out of the channel, I think, once or twice. So, it's been, dragged along the bottom, had cables wrapped around it, also, like, nets and stuff, fish nets, wrapped around it. It was there was an attempt at dissolving it. It really was in a bad place. I was like, there are plenty of engines that are above the surface of the Atlantic Ocean that we can utilize. There are others, if I recall correctly, there's one or two in the Great Lakes, and then there's another one off the Atlantic coast somewhere. These are engines that fell off of barges, fell off of boats, and were effectively, not unrecoverable, but it was like, if there's an engine on the land, it's easier to deal with. It's easier than mounting a rescue effort to raise a sunken locomotive. And there were if we want to talk about lost locomotives, though, so there were plenty of rumors of engines being stuck in tunnels or whatever, like Atlantic Avenue, that sort of thing. First of all, Atlantic Avenue's in New York City. Wasn't going to even try that. Second of all, it was pretty much assumed that the engine was like a planet type or something. It was, it was something really, really small and effectively useless to us. So there was a lot of kicking around, well, wait, maybe there's a steam engine here, and then we go, yeah, we know where there are some steam engines. We can just go to those, even if they're far away or in rough shape. You think about, immediately, sort of at the beginning of the Zombie Train Incorporated, it felt like we had a wealth of steam engines. It was like we didn't have nearly enough people to run the engines that we could get our hands on. All the ones all three at Essex, the ones at Strasbourg, and even in the museum there, the ones at Steamtown that were, sort of on the cusp, but could, still had a little bit of life left in them. And, that sort of thing. We had engines. It felt like we had engines for days, and we didn't need to go and look for anything, that would have been too difficult to repair. So we sort of ignored all these lost engine stories. I mean, we didn't totally ignore them. We definitely kicked them around. We did send a diver down to go look at 3666, but it wasn't something that we were seriously considering at any point because, like I said, there are engines above water that work just fine, or that could with some work. So, no, we never raised the Titanic, so to speak. We never pulled any engines out of the drink to run, but we definitely did a lot of thinking about it. It was one of the more interesting propositions. There was, I'd heard of an engine in New Zealand that was part of an embankment or something, and they dug it up and it ran, and it's beautiful. Like, it didn't just run when they dug it up. They had to do a whole gigantic rebuild on it. But, it's to the point is it's possible to restore an engine like that. But for us, it didn't make a whole lot of sense. Maybe before the war, when it was all about heritage and stuff, and there were people that could back that, it would have been very cool to resurrect 3666. But there are other B&M engines out there. We've got 3713, we've got 1455, and we've got, there's some little switcher we stumbled upon in Lowell that I didn't even know was there originally. Lowell, I gotta say, Lowell was a dangerous place, because it's such a dense city. It didn't have the highest population, but it is dense. And there are a lot of mill buildings there and a lot of places where zombies could hide and stuff like that. Basically, when we went through Lowell, we went through and didn't look back. And when we went in there to get this engine, it was a dangerous proposition for an engine that really wasn't worth a whole lot. It's just an 060. But that was one of the first ones where we were like, well, this engine's here. We might as well just use it. You think we can run in there and grab it and go? And the answer was no, I don't think we can, because it wasn't on track that was attached to anything. But we managed to get it out of there. We managed to get it out of there with, like, minimal casualties and really, I don't know. It wasn't the most dangerous operation, but there was definitely a lot of, okay, well, they're coming now, we need to distract them, send them this way. Or, they're coming from over here, we need to distract those and send them over here. There was a lot that went on in the recovery of one small engine, and I don't think we went back to Lowell after that. At least not for a long time. Really, I mean, I wouldn't consider Lowell the greater Boston area, but that whole area was... Once we got what we thought we needed out of there, which was like the Constitution and, a couple of smaller engines, it was like, well, let's never go back here. Let's not go back here again. Because what's the point? Why? It's so dangerous. The rails through there are an absolute tangle. To get from north to south in Boston, you have to go across this sketchy bridge and through one of the densest parts of Cambridge, and that wasn't safe or good. Um, there was, you know, the road network is also an absolute tangle. Basically, it's a death trap, basically. And when it was infested, it's better now because, it's, yeah. It's better now, because the war's over. There are no zombies. At least, as far as we know, there are no zombies. There might be one locked up in a basement or something. It always happens. It always happens that, you think it's over, and then one crawls out of the bay, or something like that, There's always the chance of it kicking off again, and we have had, as I'm sure you guys have heard, a couple of close calls since the war was quote-unquote over. Especially up in Canada, up in northern Russia, where it gets cold enough to basically freeze the thing solid. And there are groups that go out to find zombies frozen in the ice and kill them before the spring thaw. I could not do that. That's a hell of a job. That is, you're putting your life on the line in more ways than one. And there have been times where we've been requisitioned to help, like to use the Enterprise to go and help, and we've done that, but never boots on the ground. That is not our job. That is not something that I'm ever personally going to touch, because, even now, it's very dangerous. So, yeah. I mean, it's still, and you think about it, we had a sort of global cooling after, or, right at the beginning of World War Z, because you had so many people going and building campfires and stuff. Just millions and millions of people just trying to run and going out into the woods and chopping down all these trees and doing this, and it created this sort of cloud, as far as I understand. And the global temperature dropped. Not by that much, but enough to make a difference, Not like plunge us into another ice age, but it made things cooler. And which is kind of the opposite of what you expect. But when it's literally a particulate cloud, apparently that just reflects the sunlight. I don't know. I'm not a weather guy. I don't know. I just know what I've heard, and I know what I've experienced. Which I know what I've experienced is pretty anecdotal, but we definitely have had a series of pretty rough winters since the beginning of World War Z. And I can't imagine what it's like for the guys way up north. I don't go that far north. The farthest north I've been is like southern Canada, and even then, it gets brutal. It gets really brutal. Actually, we want to talk about lost engines. There were a couple of times where engines have been totally snowed in. Crew died of hypothermia or frostbite or something, and these, we sort of find them the next spring. It's like, oh, that's where that engine went. And then we have to, then we have to do the obvious. We have to do the unfortunate, set up the funeral and everything for that. And in the meantime, we had to compensate for that missing shipment of whatever it was. So much, and I say this sort of offhand with, we had to do the funeral, whatever. It's just because so many people died. It almost became mundane. It's really awful what basically what the war did to a lot of people, and I can understand it. And I say this like some sort of grizzled veteran. I wasn't a part of a world war, but I was a part of, I wasn't part of a typical world war. We do call it World War Z, but I wasn't fighting other humans, but most of the time. But there was a lot that went on. There was a lot of death, and there was a lot of loss. And it comes to a point where eventually you just sort of learn to block it out. And I don't think that's really good or healthy for anyone. But it's like, what do I do? Every time I have to talk about it, every time I have to talk about death, am I supposed to tear up? It's a hard subject. It's hard for everyone, because there isn't a single person left that didn't lose people, that didn't lose, probably most of their family, if statistics are true, which they are, as far as I understand, because a lot of people died. If there weren't so many gone, there wouldn't have been so many zombies, you know? That's why population centers were a death trap. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you next week. Trainman out.